you want the lowest price or the lowest cost? Well, they're two different things. Let me demonstrate, articulate, quantify how my high price is actually a lower cost.
Welcome back to It Comes Down to This. Today's guest is Todd Snelgrove, a globally recognized value-based sales expert and the author of Value First, Then Price. He's worked with companies of every size, from SMBs to the Fortune 100s, to shift their sales approach from volume to value. I've invited Todd on the show because he's not interested in gimmicks. He's interested in margin. In this episode, we dig into why most sales teams underprice their value, how to quantify outcomes that justify premium pricing, and the mindset shift leaders need to make if they want to grow profitably, not just bigger. In today's episode, it comes down to this. If you can't quantify your value, your customer will default to price. Welcome back to The Marketer. It's fantastic to have you back with us again. As you know, The Marketer is a show for marketers and now salespeople and business leaders too. The reason for that, the first season of The Marketer has been focused all on marketing strategy and how we as marketers can improve the companies that we're working with. But part of that is dealing with sales. And sales is so closely integrated with marketing these days. Based on my listener feedback, they said, hey, let's do some more things about sales. So that's what I've decided to include in this season of The Marketer. Today, I have a fantastic guest who has a lengthy history in sales. Todd, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Monty. Looking forward to it.
Fantastic. You know, Todd, when we were talking initially, the reason that I wanted to have you on the show is that you focus very much on value-based selling. So can you give us a quick overview of that and how would you define value-based selling?
I started focusing on value because in a lot of industries, the purchasing people got more power and more involved, and they started focusing on price. And the lowest price that met the minimum requirement kind of became the deal. So discount X, Y. And it's like, yeah, but we're better. And then I realized, I better be able to articulate better in some sort of terminology that finance and procurement people can understand.
So when we talk about value-based selling, and price, okay, so price objections are common. But how do you flip that objection into an opportunity focused on value?
I never want this to come across as arrogant, but I dealt a lot with big global, bigger customers. I say, do you want the lowest price or the lowest cost? Well, they're two different things. Let me demonstrate, articulate, quantify how my high price is actually a lower cost. So, you're $10 or $15, but my $15 one uses less ink or water or energy or downtime or whatever that is. That's what I want. Okay, well then let's talk about that.
Can any company use a value-based approach?
Any company that creates value. So you can't just throw the word value around unless you have value. Now the value can be in the product. It could be in the service. It could be in the differentiation of how you conduct your business. It could be in the pricing model that you choose to use. So it doesn't just need, your product just doesn't need to be stronger, last longer. That I hate to say is easier to say it's better, but I've done a lot of work with services. They're a little tougher to work with. Because it's more people dependent and these types of things. But, just to sit down and say, why am I better? And can I start trying to articulate that in numbers?
Yeah, I think value is a little bit easier to define when you're on the product side of things. What are you getting for your dollar? What problem is it solving for you? Then what is, you can look at watches, right? A super expensive watch value because they're rare, because they're, not many people have them, so on and so forth. So there's that aspect of value. But then
there's another component of, what is it going to solve for me as a person from a product standpoint? But I do want to focus in a little bit more on the B2B aspect, if you don't mind. Because, the marketer, we focus a lot on relationship-driven marketing, relationship-driven sales. So if you are a company and you have a service, you're a service provider of some kind, and you have a ton of competition, how does a company start to communicate value over cost when it is so tempting for service-based companies to just lower that price a little bit, under their competitors to try and grab market share?
I actually, believe it or not, wrote a chapter, first of all, on how services are more similar to products in value than people think. The process. And real quickly, a product has value potential. Okay. So we'll use an electric car. We'll use Tesla just as an example. But, we won't use gas. We know that much. But it has the potential to last longer, not have maintenance, go so many miles per charge hour, whatever. Yeah, but you have to maintain it. You have to charge it properly. You have to drive it properly. So there's a potential there, but you as the user need to do something to get the potential. Services, it's the same thing. I might suggest as a marketing consultant, we'll say, I might suggest you do this. I might suggest you do search engine optimization. I might suggest all this, but if you don't do it, one, it won't happen. Two, if you don't align it with everything else, it won't work. So everything has potential and value, but the realization of value requires the user. So we call it co-creation of value. The potential and the realization need to come together. So I think that's important to think back to. I think also, I focus on B2B marketing, so it's a good fit. There's a lot of neat things, though, from B2C to pull into the B2B world when it comes to pricing, to get customers to understand value more.
I was just having a conversation with a gentleman the other day, and he said price should come from the marketing department. Do you agree with that?
Yes. Price, and I'm not an expert here, but price is one of the 4 P's of marketing from a guy named Phil Kotler, who I've had the pleasure of meeting, Professor Kotler, amazing gentleman. But that means it needs to be based on some research, discussion, and this is my experience. So, when price comes from somebody sitting in head office that says, here's our cost, and we want a gross margin of this, and our brand is worth 20% more than that, go sell it. And I've been at way too many sales meetings where, we're launching a new product. Who's the competition? There is none. There's always competition. Doing nothing, well, that's wrong. It might not be. So there's, we're the competitors. Why are we different? Well, I won't say it. We're so-and-so. Just because our brand is this, again, back to B2B, that's not worth that. Well, we want what we want and what the customer's willing to pay for might be different. So, marketing, I like marketing to own it, because I think the more salespeople don't have price, the more they're forced to sell the value. Never tell, and I'm a salesperson, like you said, never tell me what cost is. Because if you tell me it costs us $100 to make it and you want me to sell it for $250, I'm like, there's no way it's worth that. And I had colleagues that say, Todd, we know that we can discount. I mean, there's some industries where it's how much of the discount. So once you start that mindset and feeling nobody pays list, and it's been a long time since I bought a car. I've been lucky to have company cars, but the joke at one point was my mom wouldn't even pay list price on that. It's what discount. And the second I know that I can get a 10% discount, my first question is, why can't I get 15? If I get 15, why not 20? I mean, it's a fake number. So marketing should own it. It should be research-based, not feeling-based. You should present the reasoning to sales, and then you should give the sales team ammunition to justify this. again, back to my world, of value quantification, competitive analysis, frequently asked questions, objection, like all that stuff. Not, here it is, go sell it because I want you to.
A lot of times, leadership, based on pressures for revenue and so on and so forth, can tend to drive, here's the price, go sell it, anyway, without that data that backs up the price. So when you work with, as a sales leader coming into an organization, when you come in and you're looking at their pricing, is one of the things that you do to evaluate their value and how they've come to their pricing, and what steps do you take to work with a client in determining where they should be, maybe?
What I always want to do is ask them, what is your pricing strategy? And if they can't articulate it clearly, then I know that, if they come out and they're, we're doing this, this, and this, and we have this pricing, I'm like, okay, there's some thought behind it. Also, it's always interesting, who's in charge of pricing? And I'm talking billions of dollar companies. Well, we have a global person that might, that reports into somebody. Okay, your cost, you can tell that pricing is a cost-based function. It's an accounting person who's doing the costing, landed cost, and don't get me wrong, you need to know cost. But, what I always want to do is start with, what is the value you bring to your clients? And again, it'd be different by different industries, segments, but give me an idea of your value versus the next best alternative, and then how you're pricing for that. And if they say it's cost plus, I'm making numbers up, cost plus 40%, why 40? Well, that's where we are. And we think we're worth 10% more than our major competitors because of our brand and this, that. And I'm like, okay, there's probably some work to be done here. And then, I do have people that I work with who can get into the deep algorithms and the tail end spend and all that, what I call smart stuff. But, are you a value-based pricer? Are you a cost-based pricer? And then we can see from there where the opportunities are. And the one question I ask, and I steal this from my old CEO, how many methodologies, processes, programs, because everybody uses different words, do you have to discount? And he looked at me one day and he says, Todd, I bet we have 400 different ways to discount. New order, new segment, big order, pallet, end of year. I mean, you guys, sales, create all these programs. Have I given them one program to not discount and justify and argue the value and then pay them for that? I've made it easy to discount. And my sales, I spend more, a colleague of mine went one years, I spend more time fighting with my boss to discount the price than I do with the customer.
Interesting.
Well, you want to know what? $10 million order, well, they'll say it's 10% off. I can get that order tomorrow, 10%. All I got to do is go back to the boss and I give him a bunch of reasons. Well, so-and-so's in there and the new procurement, blah, blah, blah. He goes, I'll take the $9 million order today. Do you know how much work it would be to fight for that 10%? And then they throw in, well, our gross margin's X. It's only publicly traded companies. Net profit, 10% is good. Okay?
Yeah.
10%'s half. I mean,
yeah.
And in my old world, and in most of there's not a new opportunity showing up tomorrow. There's only so many customers in the marketplace. And
yeah.
The example I use, sorry to go off topic, Monty, but
no, keep going.
I've got this slide that I use. What happens, we'll just use the US as an example, if toilet paper goes on sale? I'm a toilet paper manufacturer, and I decide that I'm going to drop the price, whatever, 10 or 20%. Now, you have to listen to my wording here. How much does the market utilization increase in the U.S. this year?
I would assume it's a very small
0.
fraction.
I might buy more and inventory it.
Mm-hmm.
I might change brands, but my consumption, this is a horrible example, my consumption of toilet paper probably won't change.
Yeah.
Yeah. People aren't going to crash their machine because the gear is cheaper now. And then I've got a competitor. So if one guy drops his price by 10%, the other person has a factory to run to. Guess what they're going to do?
Yep.
Loaded 10%. So the global, the U.S. consumption of toilet paper will not change. Market share will change, and it will change for a short period of time. So again, it's a bad example, but I notice myself. I love soup, and I watch the soup prices. And I'm like, they stay for years.
Yeah.
I'm not going to use more soup. I just know that I'm going to buy it when it's on sale and inventory it. It's America. We have big houses compared to the Europeans, and they have space issues.
I think it's actually a good example because, there's various things that affect markets. For instance, 2020, toilet paper sales were crazy because everybody was had a run on it, right? So, I know that prices are going to fluctuate based on external circumstances and stuff like that. But when we're talking about value, that's predominantly defined by the customer, correct?
100%. And price is part of that calculation, but it's our job, marketing and sales together, to say, Mr. Customer, price is only the tip of the iceberg. Look at all these other things you should consider, and these are worth more than that. That small price difference when you look at the overall.
So very simply put, if I have a product or if I have a service, and I say it's worth $500, regardless of the cost, right?
Yeah.
Let's say the cost is $200. That value is only good as much as somebody is willing to purchase it, right?
Yes, 100%.
Okay, so then when you come in and you work with somebody based on value, is there a process at which you go about to determine maybe with current customers that they have, as well as looking at competitors and what they're doing? But do you do anything in terms of like surveys or something like that to determine where where the market positions value for any company?
First of all, customers don't know the value you deliver. And again, there's this great lady in the UK. She runs the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply. They have all these associations. And we were on stage, this is years ago, and she says, and I don't have the slide in front of me, but it's very paraphrased, but very close. If you can't quantify your value using our numbers, don't ask me why I'm focusing on price. Do you have any idea of how much I'm responsible for buying? And she was the chief procurement officer before she was the CEO of this association for a drug company. Acquisitions of other companies, building factories, company cars, I buy all this. And now you're trying to sell me this narrow widget, we'll call it, it's marketing, whatever it is, and you expect me to know your value? This is all you do for a living. You need to come to me and explain what the value is. You need to explain it so I understand it, because if not, I can compare price, I can see price. So, I think it starts by doing some research, sitting back, and I have a process I go through kind of called so what. You tell me what your value is. We're better, we're faster, we're easier, we're more responsive, we're more reliable, whatever those words are. I hate to say marketing words. And then I say, okay, so what does that mean? So I'll give you, I hate to say a quick story. I was in Europe years ago, and I'm doing a session at a procurement conference with a bunch of Fortune 1000 chief procurement officers. Okay, so these are very senior people running big companies. At least they were the European ones. And I get to this slide, and I'm walking through these stages of where value is created. So somebody builds something, somebody buys something, somebody uses something, somebody disposes of something. At least from and then it depends how you walk through that, where the costs are and stuff. So I'm on the slide, and again, I used to work for an engineering company, and one of the terms used is more reliable. Okay? And I'm not a technical person, but I've picked up enough over a bunch of years. And this hand goes up. and I'm going to say it was a Swiss gentleman. What does that word mean? And I was going back to the lectern to grab my water to say, how do I explain reliability without sounding like an engineer, but that everybody could understand? And there's a standard way of the engineers always explain reliability. And the professor that was running the conference goes, I got it. I said, okay, go. He gets up there and he uses the standard engineering example. Reliability means when you want it to work, it works. A more reliable car than a less reliable car is when I go out in the garage and I turn the key, the car starts. And he says that, and another guy goes, no, reliability is a word that marketing people use when they're trying to overcharge you. And I just laughed. I think the water almost came out of my nose. I said, no, because I remember I asked this question. Okay, so your motor is more reliable than their motor, as an example. Yes. So what? Well, it'll work when you want it to work. Okay, so what? Okay. If I know it's going to work, I don't need as many backup inventory, because if I don't think it's going to work, I probably should have a backup motor because it's important to my production. So I have less inventory. Oh, okay. And if it doesn't work, it's going to stop my production. If it doesn't work, I don't have to put parts. If it breaks when I don't plan for it, it'll cost me more parts and labor. Either way, you walk down. Oh, I understand. So it was kind of that, I hate to say aha moment where they go, oh, so that's what it means. Why didn't you say that? And I laughed and I said, that's my job, is to take those words and put it into something we can all understand, dollars and cents. And, it's been a long time, but there was a book and I never read it, but you're from Venus, I'm from Mars. It's two different languages: procurement language, finance language, and engineering technical language. They don't understand each other. My job is to help the finance people understand what the value is in terms they understand, and they understand dollars and cents, not more, better, faster, easier.
This reminds me of the movie Tommy Boy. You ever seen Tommy Boy?
I'm Canadian. Yes, of course I've seen Tommy Boy.
You know the scene where he's at the distributor and he's trying to sell brakes and he's saying, let's think about this. Why would a manufacturer put a guarantee on a box? He says, is the guarantee fairy going to come down to your house when you crash your car? And it's so funny. He said, and the guy's like, I'm listening, and the whole point was he was making was value-based selling, which is the value is emotionally, you can trust our part because we have a proven record of stopping your car each and every single time. And if a manufacturer is going to post a guarantee on the box, what he's really telling you is, I have to tell you it'll work because you don't know if it will. And it was a brilliant scene. And it kind of goes so much back to what you're talking about, what was reliability, is of what I was thinking about.
There's just a side comment to add to that. So sometimes you're selling emotion, risk reduction, right? And this is one of those things where you don't want to threaten the customer. And I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan. I've never done this. Been a life insurance salesman, but it's the what if, consequential damage. So I have a slide. One thing I've had to fight a lot of my career with is, competing against offshore, lower price parts from somewhere, right? And we've also, what are you willing to pay for local supply? You should pay more. I hate to say American made. It's local, it's American made. I actually, believe it or not, quantified a 38% price difference buying locally. Because, and I won't bore you with all but if you have to buy it, I'm just going to use China for argument's sake. Well, you're okay. You better have, if it's 6 weeks, it's 6 weeks on the boat to come across to get to the port. I better have more inventory here in case something happens. And then I have currency conversion. The wand bounces like this, and it'll peg to the order of the dollar, but there's that. The spot price for shipping went from, I'm somewhat making up numbers, $2,000 per container to $18,000 because of the COVID, but also because of the spikes. So the way it used to work was stuff would come over from Asia, and then we would ship our garbage. They stopped taking the garbage. Now that the ships are going back empty, we don't manufacture stuff in America to sell. We sell services, maybe some hard, so they're going back empty. So they're like, well, so we need to make the money coming this way. So taking local and trying to put some numbers on, and it's like procurement people have said, we always knew, we didn't know what it was. And and they'd say, well, that seems high, or that seems, but you at least attempted to start to put some numbers on all the different things of what is it worth that I've got it right here versus you taking that risk.
I firmly believe that there's all kinds of ways to get to pricing, but value, and this is one of the reasons why I decided to have a lot of multiple people like yourself that are sales focused come on the show, because your sales team is an extension of a marketing team, and your marketing team is an extension of your sales team. And if you are, as a salesperson out there, and you're trying to communicate value, I think the best way to do that is to try and attach some emotional attachment to it. That's really the best way that you can communicate value, but that's going to be different for everyone, right? So your salesperson has to be able to kind of dig into the reality of that person to figure out, okay, why is this of value to you? Because a service is a service. If I'm cleaning carpets, I'm going to clean, you can get that service anywhere. If I'm making videos, you can get videos anywhere, right? But what does it do for me personally? And how can I attach myself to that as an individual to create the value that says, yes, I will pay more for that, or I will pay what you're asking for without asking you for a discount? Because if you can get to that point, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, if you can get to the point of the value-based selling where you say, yes, I want to own that because of what it does for me emotionally, whatever that may be, it may be fear, it may be joy, it may be confidence, not confidence, but, assurance, whatever it is, if you can get to that point, then you don't have to drop price or negotiate price. And if you do, you're actually devaluing yourself. Do you agree with that?
Very much so. And I think one of the most interesting ways in services to do this is to change the pricing model. Give the customer options. And you probably all heard of it, again, the death of the billable hour. So, lawyers, I'm not a lawyer, but, one lawyer's, I'm making numbers up, is $200 an hour, the other one's $300 an hour. They argue, my guy went to Yale and that guy went to Princeton. I'm like, you want to know what? I would prefer to pay you a flat fee. Go do it. So option one, flat, instead of by the hour, do a flat fee for a total option. Because basically that research shows, you're more incentivized to create more value if you're paid by flat fee. If you're paid by the hour, you're actually misaligning the incentive, how you get paid with what you're trying to do. And I won't say the name. There's one consulting company, so pure knowledge based. And I asked them a question about doing something faster, better, easier by replicating it. And he looked at me and he goes, if our customers realize we could do that, there's no way we could charge what we charge. We make everything look bespoke. So I laughed at that, number one. Number two is to have a performance-based, So here's option one is, I'm making number, $1,000 for this, or option two is $500, but I get X percent of the improvement, the increased sales or whatever it is. Now, when you do that, a few things happen. One, the customer goes, if the person's willing to put fee at risk, they must believe in it. Two, if it delivers the value that they claim it will, increase sales as an example, I want to pay them more. So you don't say it's 1,000 or 500, and if it hits these KPIs, I'll get to 1,000. No, it's 1,000, 500, and we'll just make up numbers, 20%. Well, wait, if you hit what you've projected, I'll end up paying you 2,000. You want to know what? The 1,000 is good enough. I'll take the risk reward. I mean, I've done that in B2B markets a lot. It really helps change the discussion. You just have to agree on what value are we looking for? How will we measure it? How will we track it? How do we make sure? Some companies want that. They want that alignment. Others just say, you want to know what? I'll just buy it, take the risk, but I take all the reward.
Yeah. I like that approach. I think that's really interesting. Todd, when we were talking and preparing for this episode, you mentioned the decoy effect. Can you share with the audience what that is?
How I got to this, and there's two similar. Yeah, one's called compromise, one's called decoy, and they're similar but different. But I was sitting at a school in Europe, and the professor goes, "Hey, we're going to talk about business to consumer marketing and pricing." And I'm like, "I'm B2B, so I'm on my computer doing emails." I think he got to the second slide, and I'm sure he heard me mumble a word I won't say on air, but oh my, wow, we do everything wrong. And he goes, "I was wondering how long it would take you to, laugh." And I'm like, oh my word. So, Monty, you're going to take the kids to the movies this weekend, and you're going to get there. And what a lot of companies do is they say, we've got our great version. Customers say it's too expensive. I'll create a cheap version. And I'm going to give customers two choices. And I hate to use it, the premium version, the better version. Never, ever, 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 ever do this. Because if you went to the movies with I'll use myself. There's the $7 popcorn and there's the $3 popcorn. And we'll just assume that they're linear price for volume calculations. If I was given those two choices, I honestly would sit there and say, yeah, 3 versus 7. We never finished the 7. We're going for dinner afterwards. That seems excessive. The $3 one is good enough. And the studies show if you give people two choices, depends on which study and what it is, but 80 to 85% of people will choose the lower priced of the two.
Certainly.
Good enough. I don't need, the perfect blah, blah, blah. So the decoy effect is the $6.50 popcorn. So the medium, nobody buys medium.
Yes.
Okay, maybe you can tell by my size. Nobody buys medium. $3. So $3, $7, $3, $6.50. Now what I'm looking at is $6.50 versus $7. For 50 cents more, I get X percent more. Nobody buys the $6.50. The only problem with that analogy is the finance people get involved and they say, sell more of the $6.50 because it's the highest margin one. I'm like, the $6.50 is to get me to focus on the 7.
Yes.
So in products or services, you can do the same thing. Strip down, nothing's included, by the hour, no contract, or full Monty. Sorry, Monty. The full.
Don't worry, I get that plenty.
Yeah, the full thing, and then you have another one, and then so that's one way to look at it. The other one is called the compromise effect. Same concept, but different. One day I'm going to come to Kansas City and we're going to go for a nice dinner and I'll buy. And we're going to go to, a nice steak place in KC. And you walk in and they go, okay, there's a $50 steak and there's a $100 steak. It's like, times are good, but $100 for a steak, that seems kind of ridiculous, Okay, so the $50 one becomes good. Now you put on the menu a $300 steak, the Wagyu, whatever, some and your eyes are drawn to it. The Chateaubriand, it comes with the champagne, whatever it is. $300 for a steak. You want to know what? The $100 one's good enough. So in that case, you create a fake high anchor one, and it makes you come back to the $100 one. So if it was 50 and 100, I wouldn't choose the 100. If it's 50, 100, and 300, well, the 100 is now somehow $100 steak becomes reasonable. So that's called the compromise effect. So it's kind of the opposite, but it's 3. You just got to choose which way you want customers to go, and it works in business. And I'll just leave it. Xerox has done it. Apple does it. Wall Street Journal has done. These are the studies that I have. So it works in business markets also.
It's very common when you look at software, right? When you go to any, on the websites and you look at application pricing, because they'll always give you three options, knowing that everybody chooses the middle.
Mm.
And they also have a technique of putting most popular, up in. Oh, well, everybody's buying that one. I should buy that.
Risk reduction.
Yes.
The whole idea of referral marketing for your friends. I mean, I bought cars based on what my friends tell me to do because I'm not a car guy.
Well, it is.
That network is more powerful than people realize.
100%. And that goes back to value because, well, if my friends value that, I should value it too.
Yep. If they say it's good and they're good.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They wouldn't tell me that if they didn't believe it.
Well, Todd, this is an excellent conversation. I think I could probably go on for another hour here and just continue to talk about how different marketing strategies play into this value-based selling approach. Last question I have for you is, as you're training salespeople on this approach, how difficult is it to get them to grasp what they need to do in conversations to try and get to the value?
Sometimes you get resistance, which is I sell value. I mean, every salesperson believes they sell value. So, getting beyond that. Number two, I get, pushback, just procurement doesn't care. So I usually spend, it depends on how long the session is, but I always have a session that is procurement. Here's how procurement thinks. Here's procurement strategies. Here's what procurement does to get your value and not pay for it. And is procurement willing to pay for value? And how do you get procurement to understand value? Because we could want to sell value all day long, but if the procurement is lowest price 3 bid, so I've got to get by. Then I come back and say, what is the value we provide? And then I do a breakout session at 5 why, so what, 5 whys, just to really say. And then I will challenge them, my people are better. What does that mean? And that's, what do you mean better? They're more knowledgeable. What does that mean? Well, they can solve problems. Okay, now we're starting to get somewhere, then you start to get to, how do I explain that to the customer? So I was just talking to somebody, and basically their argument was, our people have more tenure in the industry, and my company's been around, I think he said 55 years. They said, you're 55, you're 52, you're 47. The 2-year guy might be how long are they going to be around? But once they've been around 15, 20, And I said, it'd be interesting then to put on your website, average tenure, average experience in the industry. If that is a value, you believe you have more experience. Now you're calling my attention to that. Now I'm going to ask your competitors, their average people I'd say the smart people, the technical people that are doing the job have, I'm making up numbers, 27 years in the industry. What is yours? Now I'm going to ask, I'd say, if you didn't say that more or longer would be, but if you put a number 27, then they have high turnover, blah, blah, blah. They're only 5 years. Then I say, look, do you think someone that's got 27 years of doing this can do it faster, better, less riskier than someone that's got 5 years? I don't need to start quantifying that, but I've put a number out there. I'd like you to sit there and say, you want to know what, for that little bit more, why am I going to take a risk? But saying longer is a word I don't understand. And I'll not leave you with it, but there's a thing, and I see it more in Europe than I do in the US, but unique selling proposition, USP. And I laugh, and I said, really? And I have a bunch of examples. I'll try to give you a quick one. I was with this company 100 years ago, and I said, why are you able to charge 10% more? And the gentleman was Swedish, and this is in Canada, and he looks at me with a straight face, and he goes, we're Swedish. I started laughing. I thought there was, because he said it with such a straight face. I said, people pay you more, and the competitors were Japanese, American, German. I mean, they pay you 10% more in a $10 million contract because your head office is in Sweden. Yes. And he was getting offended. And I'm like, I just lost this job. And he goes, well, what? And I said, why do I care where your head office is compared to these other big international engineers? He goes, no, Swedes are known for engineering, research and development. I didn't know that. I didn't like, and I'm like, where your head office is, I don't care. Now back to the Chinese example, but I mean, just because it's unique or different doesn't mean that's value. You know, so I'm like, it's okay, it's unique, or I'm not willing to pay that much for what that is unique. So unique and value are two different things. Hopefully the uniqueness is value, but you know, where your head office is, the color of the box it ships in, you know, the number of year, you know, we are 102 years, they're only 90 years. Okay. I mean, seriously? I mean, these are unique things, guys, but we got to get a little more depth to it.
Well, I think that's excellently put. And you know, just to respond to that, I think so often companies try and determine value what they feel is the value, not what the customer thinks is value, which is what you go in and figure out and fight against, right? So, hey, this has been so fantastic. Thank you for all the insight that you've shared. I hope everybody who has listened to this understands the difference between price and value, and that you always want to focus on value-based selling, and you can watch your business grow. So until next time, thanks for joining us on The Marketer.